The President of the United States, the most powerful man in the world, also literally one of the most stressful and tough jobs in existence. Every decision you make impacts nearly every part of the world. A president is required to be good at foreign policy, domestic policy, being the head of the party, being the figurehead of the nation, and winning the biggest popularity contest in the nation, as well as being a fundraiser. They have the power to activate troops and possibly drop a nuke. They also get all the blame when politics doesn't go the way of the people, even if it's Congress that's doing all the obstructionism. The other party tends to get none of the blame when they aren't in his party during the presidential election year, but the president's party down ticket tends to get pummeled in the midterms as a way to punish the president. This was never meant to happen according to the founders. First, they never expected the job of president to be this insanely stressful and powerful, yet as government has added more and more duties and powers onto the president, through either expansionism or imperialism or a natural reaction needed for laissez-faire capitalism which requires more complex regulation, but even at the founding, how the executive branch was run was up for debate. Some wanted Washington to be King George of America and pass it down through heredity. Most expected Washington to serve out for the rest of his life, similar to how Napoleon did later. But there was another option, and like picking the turkey as the national bird as opposed to the cowardly thieving bald eagle that ended up sadly symbolizing the US so well, Benjamin Franklin had a different idea, and it didn't involve one figurehead. Franklin didn't want a president. He wanted 3 presidents, who required 2 out of the 3 to agree on an issue, and the majority of their votes prevailed. The older I get, the more I see the wisdom of this, especially as the stress of the presidency is insane, and having a check on power would both have prevented Trump from running in the first place because he thought the presidency was kingship or dictatorship, but even if someone like him won, we wouldn't all be freaking out that he'd launch a nuke or declare dictatorship. After the death of Mao, China put a check on their party chairman by essentially replacing one person with 9, though one was the figurehead. This ensured that a cult of personality could never come to power to the level Mao did, causing deaths that equaled the population of the US at the time, due to the first terrible mismanagement and fear of telling the truth under the Great Leap Forward, followed by the Cultural Revolution, which was a temper tantrum of Mao meets Lord of the Flies with purges and destruction of artifacts on a massive scale. Since the Council of Nine, China has exploded economically and in stability. Each president could have a particular speciality. So often, presidents get elected for one set of policies they're specialized in, and then the world throws them a curveball, and they have to suddenly shift to their less specialized role. George W. Bush came in as a domestic president, but 9/11 happened, possibly just through poor understanding of foreign policy, and we lost tens of thousands of military lives, a disorganized Middle East, reduced freedoms, and $6 trillion in debt. Obama came in promising to end the war and other things, and then the economic crash happened, throwing many of his ideas off track. One president of foreign policy experience, one of domestic policy, and perhaps a science or engineering president. Each president has a 6-year term, and a presidential election happens every 2 years, but it's not nearly the circus we have now. We can either elect a new vice president with every new president to run with them to add some more political will to the mix, or just have the Speaker of the House break any tie if one of them dies. Each president could even get a special power for their position. The Foreign Affairs President could have a power to deploy troops and launch nukes unless the other two objected, and negotiate treaties. The Domestic President could have pardon powers and the ability to appoint the Supreme Court Justice. The Science President could be in charge of signing statements on regulation. These are just ideas. It would ensure the President isn't there to both perpetuate the great man myth and allow presidents to think a bit more long-term. 12-year 2 terms would no longer be as weird or seen as a power grab because they were only one of 3 instead of one person amassing all the power. Then the president wouldn't have to age 4 years for every 1 year they're in power. And while still a tough job, they wouldn't have to take on all the stress and decisions about things they couldn't possibly have any experience in because they're just humans with limited time studying. It would generate much more bipartisanship as these presidents, like the Supreme Court, could deeply disagree with each other but still have to deal with each other. Spread this idea if you think Franklin was right, and this could be a more stable and safe form of executive power.